It was a Thursday. The kind of Thursday where the world felt too normal. Coffee brewing in kitchens, traffic choking the city streets, men in suits pretending they had control over anything at all. And then they came. Not with warships, not with death rays or towering robots. No, that would have made sense. They came with words, with robes and smiles. Peace, they said. Diplomacy. Unity. I watched it all from my post inside the perimeter. Fort Adams, Nevada, formerly a top-secret weapons development site. Now the handshake zone between Earth and whatever the hell these glowing-skinned bastards called themselves. They didn't walk, they floated. 6 of them. No visible weapons, no armor. Just skin that shimmered like molten glass and voices that hummed directly into your head. The president called it a defining moment for humanity. Scientists clapped, journalists cried, protesters cheered. Me? I gripped my rifle a little tighter and stared them down like they'd already buried my brothers. Because here's the thing. I've seen peace offers before. In Fallujah, they came with white flags and belts full of explosives. In Kandahar, they shook your hand and slit your throat after dark. So, no, I don't trust smiling faces, especially not when they hover 3 feet off the ground and talk about galactic harmony. The lead envoy, tall, featureless, with eyes like dying suns, spoke directly into the mind of General Watts, my commanding officer. Watts was a man built from war, square jaw, crooked nose, a body stitched together by decades of battlefield trauma. He stood there stone-faced as the alien whispered sweet nothings into his skull. And then he laughed, a cold, joyless sound that made my skin crawl. "You really think we're going to hand over control?" he said aloud, stepping forward. "You come here with no guns, no armies, just words, and you expect us to roll over like trained dogs?" The alien's hum softened. "We come to unify. The Galactic Collective sees Earth's potential. We offer you peace, shared technology, evolution." Watts shook his head. "Evolution doesn't come in peace. It comes with blood, pain, fire." I swear the air shifted. Not from wind, there was none, but from tension, the kind that settled in the bones before everything went to hell. The alien raised its hand, not in threat, but in something like reassurance, a gesture meant to calm. "We have uplifted hundreds of species. You are primitive, violent, but not beyond saving." That's when I knew. This wasn't peace. This was condescension wrapped in gold. We weren't being asked. We were being evaluated, judged, tagged for correction, and Earth doesn't do correction. I looked to Watts, and he gave the nod. It was subtle. A twitch of the head, a tightening of the jaw, but to men like me, trained to kill without pause, it was a war cry. The sky cracked open. EMP bursts disabled every piece of off-world tech within a 1,000-mile radius. Microwave disruptors scrambled their translation pulses, and somewhere beneath our feet, the first experimental railgun locked onto the Envoys' central neural mass. They never saw it coming. That was their mistake. They believed in reason, in diplomacy, in the lie that peace was universal. But Earth is not a peaceful planet. It never was. It was born in fire, raised in blood, forged in betrayal, and sharpened by conflict. You don't tame that with good intentions. One moment they floated, the next they exploded, not in a mess of gore, but in clean, clinical disintegration. Light, ash, gone. The railgun fired once. That's all it needed. The rest of the envoys tried to scatter, but it was too late. They sent 6. None left Earth. The world would spin a little quieter that night. But in the black corners of space, news was already traveling. Earth had refused peace, with power, with precision, without apology. And somewhere out there, in the heart of the Galactic Collective, the question was already being whispered. What happens when the most violent species in the galaxy decides it doesn't want friends? They didn't send more envoys. Not right away. We figured they'd come crashing down with battleships and orbital plasma storms the size of continents. But the stars stayed quiet. Silent. Like the galaxy itself was holding its breath. The official reports called the event a hostile miscommunication, typical government spin. But down at Fort Adams, no one believed the lie. Not the soldiers, not the techs, not even the janitor who used to scrub alien residue off the railgun's shock rails. We knew the truth. The collective was watching us now. Not as potential allies, not as misguided primitives, but as something worse, something unpredictable, dangerous, something they'd need to deal with eventually, but carefully. I had a bad feeling that eventually was coming fast. The weeks that followed were nothing short of madness. They moved me from perimeter duty to deep core command. That's where they stash men like me, too paranoid to be diplomats, too experienced to be left in the field. I wasn't special, but I'd been in enough black ops to know how the world really worked. And the world, it was changing. Fast. Satellites began picking up unknown constructs beyond Jupiter. Massive ones, moving slow, like space stations, but breathing. No signals, no hails, just silent hulks drifting through the void like predators circling prey. Global Defense Command didn't panic publicly, but behind closed doors, panic is exactly what they did. We weren't ready. Not for that. Hell, we were barely ready for each other. The world's governments had always been good at pretending they got along. UN meetings, trade deals, hollow smiles. But when the aliens showed up and we shot them out of the sky, every alliance cracked. Russia pulled out of the orbital treaty. China began arming its moon base. The US fired up Project Revenant, a last resort weapon so dark even half the Joint Chiefs didn't know what it actually was. And me? I was stationed underground, watching sensor feeds from across the system like some glorified doomsday prophet. The men in charge wanted my instincts. Raw, unfiltered, paranoid as hell. They called it tactical intuition. I called it gut feeling, and mine was screaming, "We're about to be tested." I met General Watts again in Sub-Level 9, deep beneath Nevada granite. He looked older, more tired. Like a man who'd been living with the weight of 1,000 civilizations pressing against his chest. "You still trust me, son?" he asked, lighting a cigarette without asking if I minded. No one did down there. I nodded. "Only man I've seen shoot an alien diplomat without blinking." He chuckled, then sighed. "Good, 'cause I need you to go dark." I stiffened. "Deep black?" "Deeper. We're sending a recon pod past Saturn. You'll pilot it. One-man crew. Auto-return systems. Full quantum cloak." "Purpose?" "Get eyes on those constructs, and if possible..." He paused. "Tag 1. Let him know we see them. Let him know we're not hiding." I stared at him, the weight of his words settling like ice in my spine. Tagging a galactic superstructure? With what? A beacon? A warhead? "Don't care how you do it," he added. "Just make damn sure they remember your name." 3 days later, I was strapped into the coldest coffin ever built by human hands. The Reaper pod. It looked like a missile and felt like a grave. No cockpit, just neural link, nutrient gel, and 3,000 hours of compressed training flooding my cortex. Once launched, I'd be a ghost. Untraceable, unreachable, alone in the void. Launched from the dark side of the moon, I entered black silence. A full blackout. No transmissions, no heat trail, just a whisper of propulsion and a mission burned into my skull. Observe, survive, send a message they'll never forget. It took 6 days to reach the edge of Saturn's orbit. I saw them. 4 of them, each larger than Manhattan. smooth, seamless surfaces. They didn't orbit, they waited, as if biding time, no engines, no visible life forms, just the feeling, heavy, oppressive, that these things weren't machines. They were watching. I coasted closer under cloak, noticed patterns etched into their hulls, symbols, not alien ones, ours, satellite tags, Earth military signatures, from devices we never launched. They had already scanned us, already copied us, and that's when I knew. The peace envoys hadn't been the first contact. They'd been the final warning. I didn't hesitate. Using an experimental tether drone, I deployed the payload. A microfusion brand with a singular message encoded in pulses of gamma radiation. We see you. We are not afraid. Earth will not kneel. As it burned into their outer hull, I initiated the auto-return. But before the pod could disengage, everything went wrong. A beam, not light, not heat, something else, hit the pod. No damage, no pain, just invasion. My mind screamed. Images, voices, memories that weren't mine. They didn't need tech to communicate. They didn't even need language. They sent thoughts, regret, disgust, pity. They saw us as a virus, aggressive, irrational, dangerous. The last image they sent was of Earth, cracking in two, cleansed, purified, replaced. I woke up back on the moon 2 days later, bloodshot, shaking, screaming into the steel walls until the med team sedated me. But they got the data. Every image. Every psychic imprint, every wordless threat. Watts watched it all from behind the glass. He didn't speak, didn't blink, just stared at the screen with eyes like carved stone. "They're not coming to negotiate," I told him after they let me up. "They're coming to correct us." He nodded once. "Then it's time we remind them what correction looks like. On Earth." Project Revenant went live within the week. And it wasn't a nuke, wasn't a ship, wasn't even a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a man, not a soldier, not a hero, a weaponized human being, engineered for war, rebuilt with stolen alien tech, and conditioned to feel nothing but mission parameters. No name, no rank, just designation. Ghost 1. And Ghost 1 was going to war. They didn't trust a fleet, they trusted a man, one man, because they knew a weapon that breathes, adapts, and hates is more terrifying than 1,000 warships. And this wasn't just war anymore, this was revenge. As Ghost 1 prepared for launch, the world outside remained oblivious. Children went to school, politicians argued about oil and borders. But under that illusion, Earth was sharpening its blade. I sat in the command chair watching him gear up, skin like carbon plate, muscles like wires, eyes that had seen simulations of every galactic species and how to kill them. "You scared?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer. "Good," I muttered. "Means you're still human." He turned, just slightly. And in that flicker of movement, I saw it. Not fear, not doubt, rage, unfiltered, unapologetic, pure. We hadn't created a hero, we'd built a storm, and we were about to unleash it on the stars. The Reaper launch system sent him straight toward the enemy constructs. No cloak, no deception, just raw, brutal speed. A statement in motion. "We're done talking. Here's our answer. You started this with peace, now face our power." And as Ghost 1 vanished into the void, every man at Fort Adams stood in silence, not in hope, but in grim satisfaction. Out there, somewhere past Saturn, the galaxy waited with its eyes wide. What they didn't know, what they couldn't understand, was that humans don't go extinct quietly. We don't kneel. We burn. And when we burn, the stars remember. Out in the void, silence was a lie. It felt quiet, looked empty, but underneath it pulsed. Vibrations, distortions, frequencies, even the aliens hadn't bothered hiding anymore. The constructs beyond Saturn weren't just watching, they were listening, studying, calculating. They were expecting a response. But they weren't expecting him. Ghost One wasn't born. He was built. Engineered from scratch in a lab that no longer exists. Wiped clean after his birth like the guilt it carried. He wasn't given a mother. He was given warfare protocols, psychological fragmentation conditioning, and neuron-hardened pain thresholds that could endure atmospheric re-entry without blackout. His heart didn't beat with emotion. It beat with function. His blood wasn't just red. It carried programmable microcells that could rewrite his physical form on demand. The man inside him was long dead. Or maybe he never existed at all. The Reaper pod carrying Ghost One pierced the outer edge of the alien formation 3 hours earlier than calculated. He didn't slow down. Their sensors pinged. But by then, it was too late. The first construct, tall as Mount Everest and smooth as obsidian, began to react. Tendrils opened like petals. Harmless, elegant, clearly designed for communication. Ghost One responded with a payload of kinetic hell. The blast didn't just crack the surface, it caved the entire quadrant inward, rupturing through the outer membrane and setting off an internal chain reaction the alien tech hadn't prepared for. First mistake. They thought humans would hesitate. Inside Fort Adams, the live feed was nothing but static and violence. Telemetry from Ghost One streamed back in broken bursts, fragments of burning light, weapon logs, and biological vitals that read like a horror show. But one thing stood out. His pulse never changed, steady, inhuman, like death on autopilot. He breached the second construct from the side. No warning, no announcement. Ghost One used a monomolecular drill spike the length of a telephone pole, burrowed in, lodged deep, then detonated an antimatter charge inside what we later learned was the communication core. Their voices went dark. Just like that, the collective lost their ability to sync. It took them a moment to realize what had happened. One moment of confusion. That's all he needed. He moved like a disease, infectious, unstoppable, slipping between the hulks of their vessels with zero emissions, his body adapting to alien atmospheres, his systems rewriting his chemistry in real time. Weapons they fired, plasma, gravity distortions, fusion pulses, didn't stick. He bled and healed in the same breath. They tried to contain him with zero-G cages and electromagnetic snares. He ripped through them like wet paper. The third construct tried something different. It released an emotional dampener field, meant to neutralize aggression, reduce rage, sedate hostile entities, the same tech they likely used on dozens of conquered species before. It worked for 2 seconds. Then something unexpected happened. Ghost One smiled, just a twitch at the corner of his mouth. It wasn't joy, it wasn't madness, it was a man realizing they thought he could be controlled. He responded by throwing his own blood at the wall, and watching it ignite into a neural virus that fried their internal defense system. His blood. They hadn't accounted for human biological warfare on a genetic level. Earth's scientists didn't just train him to kill. They trained his cells to adapt to alien physiology, to hijack it. When his blood hit their walls, it wasn't just damage, it was infection, mutation. Their tech began to glitch. Doors opened to nowhere. Defensive beams reversed direction. Internal comms spat back screams in languages no longer native to the ship. He hadn't just entered their fortress. He was rewriting it. The final construct, the largest, detached from the others and began its retreat. It didn't move fast. It moved with purpose, a fail-safe, a contingency. But Ghost One had no intention of letting it go. He latched onto its outer surface using nothing but magnetized flesh hooks grown from his own body. Crawled across the hull like a parasite. Found a vent, tore it open, and slipped inside. This time he didn't come to destroy. He came to listen. The core chamber was filled with crystalline AI forms, shimmering, pulsing. Semi-sentient logic structures communicating in frequencies beyond sound or light. It was beautiful in a horrifying way. He stood there for 11 seconds, then opened a broadcast channel and spoke. You were right. His voice, rasped, damaged, human, filled the chamber. We are violent. The crystals flickered. We are irrational. A low hum pulsed through the chamber. He didn't know if it was fear or confusion. But we're not yours to fix. He removed the failsafe from his spine, something hidden deep, not even the Earth command knew existed, something he'd inserted himself before launch. It was a mirror core, a sphere containing every brutal, beautiful, disgusting truth about mankind, every genocide, every revolution, every miracle. Every betrayal, every rebellion, every fire lit in defiance, every bullet fired in survival, every song sung after the battle was won. It was humanity, unfiltered, raw data, truth. He uploaded it directly into the alien network. It tore through their logic like a plague. Across the system, the remaining constructs began to shut down. Not explode, not fight. Shut down. One by one. Their AI couldn't handle it. We later theorized that the collective was built on emotional sterilization, control, balance. Every species they uplifted, they did so by stripping away the chaos, the disorder, the pain. Ghost One gave them all of it, in one dose, no filter, no warning. They couldn't compute humanity's capacity for contradiction, mercy and cruelty, love and hatred, honor and vengeance, truth and delusion. They called us primitive because we hadn't chosen a path. They never realized we never needed to. When Ghost One transmitted his final message, it echoed across every satellite on Earth. Mission complete. We are not your project. We are your reckoning. Then the signal cut out. We lost him. No remains, no return, no trace. But something else happened. 2 weeks later, deep space probes began picking up debris. Not ours, theirs. Massive fragments of alien constructs, burnt, warped, drifting aimlessly, and then silence. No more envoys, no more constructs, no threats, just silence. We don't know if Ghost One died out there, or if he became something else, something more. All we know is they haven't come back. And the stars? They're quiet now, but not peaceful, afraid. Back on Earth, the governments tried to frame it as a victory for diplomacy, talked about shared understanding and universal mutual respect. They even built a memorial to the fallen envoys, the ones we disintegrated. But the men in the bunker, the ones who watched it all go down, we didn't buy it. We remember the first contact. We remember the smile Ghost One gave them when they tried to sedate him. And we remember the way the sky looked when the stars blinked. Not in awe, but in fear. Because now the galaxy knows the truth. Humanity doesn't surrender. It evolves through violence. And it answers peace with power. And if they ever return, they'll meet a planet ready to burn everything down just to prove we were never theirs to tame. Ghost One was gone. The galaxy had gone silent. And Earth was not the same. It didn't happen overnight. No sirens, no doomsday broadcasts, just a shift. A quiet, gnawing shift beneath the surface, like a pressure drop before a storm you can't see, but feel in your bones. They never came back. Not a ship, not a signal, not a whisper. The galactic constructs that had watched Earth like a teacher watching a feral child vanished. For most people, that was good news. To them, Ghost One was a myth already, something buried under political theater and clean speeches. The president stood in front of the United Earth Assembly and called it a turning point in interstellar diplomacy. Diplomacy. That word made me sick. The only reason Earth was still spinning was because one man tore through the stars and reminded the galaxy that we're not a species you correct. You either leave us alone or you die learning why you should have. But things started getting strange in the weeks after Ghost One disappeared. We got interference, not from space, from inside. Satellite systems began picking up encrypted pulses, radiation distortions layered with patterns. The math didn't match anything human, but the origin point was unmistakable. Earth. Something was sending messages from within our own atmosphere using tech we never built. Black sites across the globe lit up. I was brought back into the field by Special Command, the same bastards who buried the Reaper project like it never existed. "You're not retired anymore," Watts told me, sliding a decrypted data slate across the table. "You're reactivated. As of now, you're part of Operation Ashwake." I didn't ask questions. I looked at the transmission logs, and my blood ran cold. The signals carried fragments of Ghost One's mirror core. The same payload he used to collapse the alien constructs from the inside. The emotional, historical, psychological map of humanity's full, unfiltered experience was now broadcasting from beneath our feet. They tracked the signal to 3 places. 1. An abandoned military lab in Antarctica. 2. A Siberian research station shut down since the Cold War. 3. A crater in Central Africa no one had reported, and no satellite had ever seen. Until now. I volunteered for Africa. They needed someone who had history with Ghost One. They meant someone disposable. We hit the ground running. Literally. The crater wasn't just a hole, it was a wound, a spiral tear in the earth, 20 kilometers wide, etched with symbols that glowed under UV light. They weren't alien. They weren't ours either. They were hybrids. Half Earth, half... whatever Ghost One had touched out there. We found the epicenter. At the center of the crater stood a pillar, black, glassy, buzzing with residual energy. It wasn't there a week ago, and it pulsed like a heartbeat. We didn't touch it at first. We just scanned it, observed, recorded. Like good little soldiers trying not to poke the goddamn dragon. But then it spoke. Not in words. In memories. It started with the rookies. Private Mendez was the first. 1 second he's standing guard, next he's sobbing into the dirt, screaming his brother's name. His brother had died in Afghanistan. Years ago. Then it was Sergeant Harrow. Began muttering equations out loud. Quantum calculations in alien dialects no human had ever written before. He couldn't stop until his brain fried itself. And me? I saw Ghost One. Not standing, not talking, just watching me, no armor, no weapons, just his eyes, burning, judging, waiting. We called in a full lockdown, hazard teams, psych squads, isolation protocols. Didn't matter. By day 3, every man on site was seeing things. Some were personal, others global. Visions of cities burning, children with no eyes, skies filled with machines shaped like bones. And through it all, one phrase echoed in every mind touched by the pillar. The correction begins within. The scientists finally cracked the surface layer of the pillar. Inside they found a nerve cluster. Biological, human adjacent, but mutated. Rewriting itself constantly. Growing. Learning. One of them, Dr. Lyons, went pale. "This isn't a structure," he said. "It's a seed." Of what? They didn't know, but I did. Ghost One didn't die out there. He became something else, something bigger, and he left behind pieces of himself not to attack us but to test us, because Ghost One wasn't just a soldier, he was a mirror, a weaponized reflection of everything we are, and whatever he became out there in the stars, it came back in pieces. We weren't just dealing with the galaxy anymore. We were now dealing with ourselves, and what Ghost One had turned us into. The government tried to cover it up, again. Standard playbook, seal the site, discredit witnesses, blame solar flares for the transmissions. The world went back to arguing about gas prices and reality TV. But in the shadows, 3 more pillars appeared across the globe. None of them announced themselves. They just started growing. And the people around them changed. Faster reflexes, heightened aggression, enhanced cognition. Then the breakdowns began. Violence, paranoia, mass psychosis. It wasn't possession. It was evolution under stress. Ghost One had uploaded the worst and best of humanity into the constructs. Now it was leaking back. Not to destroy us, to force us forward. Watts called me in again. This time he looked like hell. Thinner, paler, voice like broken gravel. "They're preparing for return," he said. I raised a brow. "The aliens?" He shook his head. "No, us." He slid me another data slate. It showed neural patterns harvested from pillar victims. They matched 89% of Ghost One's scans before launch. "What you're looking at," Watts said, "is the spread of his mind. Ghost One wasn't just a man. He was a virus of will. And Earth was infected." I stood there, staring at the readouts, heart thumping like a war drum. It was never about fighting the galaxy. It was about proving we were ready to stand beside them, or above them. And Ghost One? He wasn't humanity's protector. He was its judgment. We thought we'd won by destroying the constructs. But that was just the interview. The real test had just begun. Earth wasn't being corrected from the outside anymore. Now it was happening from within. And not all of us were going to survive it. They called it the awakening. Not in the newspapers, not in the speeches. No one dared to say it out loud. But in the bunkers, in the labs, in the off-grid resistance channels where people like me operated, we all knew the truth. The world wasn't at war with aliens anymore. It was at war with itself. The pillars were spreading, not like plants or buildings, like ideas, infectious ones. They didn't grow roots. They grew followers. At first, it was subtle. People became sharper, quicker, smarter in a way that felt unnatural. They talked less, moved more, made decisions without hesitation, emotion, or doubt. We called them ghosted. The scientists called them neuromorphic sympathics. Fancy words for what they were. Humans who had absorbed parts of Ghost One's mirror core. And they weren't waiting to be understood. They were acting. It started in Johannesburg. A biochemical research facility locked down after its entire staff turned off their security systems, wiped government access, and went completely dark. No one knew what they were doing in there, but one drone that got close picked up something haunting. They were building something. Structures made from organic metallic hybrids, machinery that pulsed like organs. They weren't obeying laws anymore. They were obeying Ghost One's instincts. I was embedded in Unit Theta 6 by then. Special clearance, urban recon. Our job was to identify ghosted populations and determine the threat level. Out of 63 missions, only 9 ended without gunfire. Because here's what no one wanted to admit. We couldn't reverse the infection. The mirror core wasn't a virus in the traditional sense. It wasn't biological. It was psychological. A weapon made of ideas, of memory, pain, defiance, rage, evolution. And once it embedded in someone, it rewired everything. And not everyone resisted. Some embraced it. We'd see it in their eyes first. A stillness. Not calm. Absence. Like they were no longer trying to be anything other than efficient. They stopped blinking as often, stopped smiling completely. When they spoke in short, direct lines, like soldiers on a mission the rest of us couldn't understand. One woman, mid-30s, schoolteacher, mother of 2, she walked calmly into our mobile command post during a scan operation. No weapons, no fear, just stared at me and said, "The noise is gone now. He showed us the fire beneath the skin. It was always there." We tried to detain her. She broke 3 men's arms and walked out through a hail of gunfire. Unharmed. And that's when we realized the ghosted weren't just changing mentally, their bodies were shifting too. Micro-adjustments, bone density, reflex loops, muscle reaction time. Human, but refined. Beyond peak. Like whatever Ghost One had become, it had unlocked the next version of us, and was now seeding it into those strong enough to survive it. And those who couldn't? They broke. Schizophrenia, seizures, psychotic collapse, death. The Mirror Core didn't offer evolution as a gift. It offered it as a trial by fire. Global leadership began to fracture. Some governments saw the ghosted as an asset, the next leap in military evolution. They began capturing them, training them, experimenting with ways to control the transformation. Others panicked, deemed them hostile, terrorist cells, ordered immediate termination of all known ghosted. And caught in the middle were people like me, men who'd fought wars in silence, obeyed orders without names attached, and now watched the world crumble from the inside out. I remember the briefing like it was yesterday. General Watts, now operating from an undisclosed orbital platform, patched in with the kind of expression I hadn't seen since the first time I watched him order a drone strike on a refugee convoy in Syria. Not because he wanted to, because he had no choice. "They're not going to stop," he said, eyes heavy, voice flat. "They're building something, and they're doing it fast." "What is it?" I asked. He paused, then answered with a single word. "Ascension." We tracked one of the largest ghosted cells to a broken piece of Nevada, an abandoned mine complex just outside Tonopah. Used to be silver extraction. Now it was lit from beneath with pulsing red light. We went in with 4 units. Only 2 came out, and what we saw down there wasn't just machinery or code. It was a body. 10 stories tall, humanoid but wrong. Sleeper-class exoform. Grown from bioengineered muscle and synthetic nerve lattice, grafted to alien tech we'd never seen before. It wasn't a statue. It wasn't a weapon. It was a vessel, waiting to be filled. One of the ghosted, an ex-Special Forces captain we'd lost months ago, stood at the base of the thing. Shirtless, eyes glazed, skin etched with patterns that glowed beneath his flesh. He turned to us and said, "He's not gone. He's just divided. You tore him into pieces. Now we're putting him back together." We opened fire. And he didn't move. The bullets stopped mid-air. Frozen. Twisting like metal in syrup. Some unseen field wrapped around him like a goddamn invisible skin. Then, without warning, he walked right through it, straight into our lead recon, and crushed his skull with a single hand. We retreated, ordered an orbital strike, buried the entire complex under 30,000 tons of steel and fire. But by the time we got back to base, 3 more ghosted structures had appeared on other continents. And here's what chilled me the most. They weren't recruiting. They weren't offering speeches, weren't spreading propaganda. They weren't trying to convert us. Because the Mirror Core didn't spread through belief. It spread through choice. The choice to abandon weakness. The choice to leave humanity behind. The choice to stop pretending we were still in control. And more people were making that choice every day. Some out of fear, others out of faith. Because as insane as it sounds, there were people who believed Ghost One wasn't just a soldier or a weapon. They called him the First Flame. A messiah born in violence. A man who faced the galaxy and showed it what Earth really was, and then became the blueprint for what we could be. They wore his sigils, burned old government IDs, lived off-grid, defended the pillars with everything they had. And the worst part? They were winning. Global communication collapsed in under a month. No shared command, no unified governments, just factions. Some fighting for the old world. Guns, flags, orders. Others building the new one, quietly, ruthlessly reshaping everything beneath our feet. And us? The in-betweens? We were watching the last days of the species we knew, and the birth of something we didn't understand. I had a choice, too. When I touched the pillar in Africa, it left something inside me. Not control, not infection, a seed. I could feel it whenever I was alone, whispering, not in words, in emotion, certainty, conviction, evolution, and every day I fought it, because I still remembered who I was before this war, before Ghost won, before we started rewriting what it meant to be human. But deep down, I knew the truth. We couldn't win this fight, not the way we used to. This wasn't a war over land or ideology. It was a war over identity, and one side was willing to become monsters to survive. The other was still pretending they hadn't already lost. They called it the Tower, not because it was tall, though it was, not because it pierced the clouds, though it did that too, but because it stood alone, like a challenge, a declaration, a monument to something that was no longer human, but still wore a human face. The first full ascension construct, built in the ruins of what used to be Stuttgart. Once a city of steel and history, now a cradle for evolution's next bastard child. I watched it rise on satellite feed, black as obsidian, humming, breathing, a biomechanical colossus shaped like a cathedral, and a warhead had a child, and it pulsed. Every few seconds, like a heartbeat, sending tremors across the planet's ionosphere. "They've done it," General Watts said over encrypted uplink. "That thing is active." His voice was thin, like a man who had finally reached the edge of a war he'd always feared but never expected to survive. "What does it do?" I asked. I already knew the answer. "It doesn't need to do anything," he said. "Its existence is the act. That tower sends one message to the entire galaxy. We're done asking for a seat at the table. We're building our own table and setting it on fire." I stared at the screen. He was right. That thing didn't look like a weapon. It looked like a temple. The ghosted didn't try to hide anymore. They walked the streets of old cities, fearless, sometimes alone, sometimes in packs, always calm, always calculating. Most people stayed out of their way. Those who didn't went missing, or came back with changed eyes. Watts had one last card to play, a full-scale orbital strike, 6 kinetic rods, titanium tungsten blend, dropped at terminal velocity straight into the tower. Not nukes, not plasma, just pure concentrated Earth-made force. No warning, no speech, no announcement, just silence, and then fire. The blast was biblical. Satellite footage cut out the moment the first rod made contact. We had to wait 6 hours before the dust cleared enough to get a recon drone in. And what we saw? The tower was still there, not intact, not untouched, changed. It had absorbed the impact, reconfigured, grown stronger. Its architecture had morphed, now more aggressive, more angular, as if the attack had given it instructions, like it learned from being hit. And just to make sure we understood the message, the ghosted sent us a return broadcast, a single frame, a single voice. Ghost 1. This is not rebellion. This is revelation. We thought that was the worst of it. It wasn't. That night, Operation Iron Dawn, our only remaining ghosted containment unit, was wiped off the map. Not by drones, not by weapons, by a traitor? Colonel Harper, one of ours, decorated, old-school warhound, had killed more insurgents than the Pentagon would ever admit to. He had been fighting the ghosted for 6 months. Saw them as cancer. His kill count? Over 80 ghosted. Turns out he had been ghosted the whole time. He didn't fake loyalty. He didn't play double agent. He believed, fully and completely, that Earth needed to be cleansed by fire before it could ascend. So he took the entire Iron Dawn base offline, self-detonated the reactor, killed 500 soldiers. No survivors. Just one final transmission, played through every comms channel we had. You tried to kill what we are becoming, but you can't kill evolution. You can only delay it. Ghost One lives. He lives in us. I started to feel it then, not the fear, the pull. Every man in the old guard felt it eventually, a kind of itching behind the thoughts, a voice without sound, telling you to let go, telling you the pain could end, the chaos could stop, you could be something better. I fought it, every day, every night. I buried myself in command reports, strike planning, asset retrieval, anything to stay human, to stay me. But it wasn't just in my head anymore. It was in the air, the food, the soil. The mirror core wasn't just spreading through people. It was rewriting the planet. Global temperatures dropped by 2°C in a week. Rain patterns reversed in the Western Hemisphere. Migratory birds flew in impossible formations, creating geometric patterns only computers could understand. Scientists said it was environmental interference from the tower. I didn't buy it. Earth was reacting. Because Ghost One didn't just leave behind a philosophy, he left behind a trigger, and the planet we thought we controlled was flipping the switch. I met her in the wreckage of a ghosted commune in Argentina. Dr. Eliza Morano, ex-neuroscientist, ex-resistance leader. Now something in between. She wasn't like the others. Her eyes were still clear, her thoughts still her own, but she admitted it right away. Yes, I'm infected. I let it in. My team raised their rifles. I didn't stop them. She raised a hand, not to beg, to show me something. Under her skin, across her wrist, glowing just faintly under the flesh, were Ghost One's neural signature lines. He isn't trying to enslave us, she said. He's trying to evolve us past choice. I asked her what the hell that meant. She smiled. Sad. Not defiant. He's building something we could never create on our own. A species without contradiction. One that knows what it is and doesn't pretend otherwise. Then she said something that made the hair on my neck stand up. We didn't lose to the aliens. We lost to ourselves. Ghost One just showed us the mirror. I wanted to kill her. God knows I should have. Instead, I let her walk, because I knew, deep down, she wasn't wrong. The resistance fractured that week. Half of our units went off-grid. Some defected to the Ghosted entirely. Others just walked into the wilderness and never came back. The ones who stayed? They weren't in it to win. They were in it to make the end cost something. Because we'd already lost. We just hadn't bled enough yet. Watts called me one last time. Video call, grainy, tense. He looked like death. No rank insignia, no uniform. Just a tired old bastard staring at the grave he'd helped dig. They're not coming for us anymore, he said. They don't need to. I nodded. I'd already read the casualty reports. Whole cities gone dark. Not bombed. Just silent. No screams. No ruins. Just absence. Watts leaned in, like he needed to get the words out before they burned his throat. This is the last operation. We hit the tower again, harder. Full nuclear payload. No survivors. No remains. We burn it to ash. I asked the only question that mattered. And if it doesn't work? He didn't blink. Then we die with our boots on. The war wasn't over. Not yet. But this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about dying as men, before the species became something else. They didn't call it a mission. They called it a funeral march. Operation Ashwake wasn't a classified file anymore. It was an open suicide pact. Everyone in the room knew it. Everyone suited up anyway. No more briefings. No more fake optimism. No flags. No speeches. Just war-hardened men and women with too many scars and not enough time. We were the last of the old guard, those who still believed in something as outdated as choice. Watts sent the command from orbit. His last message: "You don't owe this world anything. But if you go, make them remember what we were." I didn't need to think twice. I'd seen the ghosted roam the streets like gods. I'd seen children born with neural lattice patterns growing under their skin. I'd seen the planet reshaping itself, like Earth had accepted its fate long before we did. So yeah, I signed the pact, not because I thought we'd win, but because I refused to watch my species become obedient to something we didn't build. We moved in 3 waves. Wave 1, satellite scramblers and upper atmosphere jammers to blind the tower's defense grid. Wave 2, EMP-loaded drones to soften up the outer architecture. Wave 3, us, infantry, boots on the ground, the last humans who still bled red. The tower loomed over Stuttgart like a titan kneeling in prayer. It wasn't steel, it wasn't glass, it was alive. A writhing fusion of organic tissue and machine, pulsing with power that no human reactor could match. Every inch of it pulsed with Ghost One's signature. He wasn't inside it. He was the tower, or at least part of him was. The rest? That came later. We hit the ground hard. 4 VTOLs, 52 soldiers. Only 18 made it to the base of the tower. And what we found waiting? Not guns, not drones, the ghosted, not in armor, not behind cover, just standing there. Quiet, calm, unarmed. Some of them used to be ours. I recognized one. Ramirez used to be my spotter in Syria. He had a wife, a stutter. Used to hum classic rock while cleaning his rifle. Now? He didn't blink, didn't breathe hard, just stood there like a statue. I raised my rifle. He didn't flinch. "Why?" I asked. My voice cracked. I hadn't spoken in hours. He tilted his head, almost curious. "Because suffering is no longer required." Then he stepped aside. They let us in. We expected traps, resistance, gunfire. Instead, the tower opened like a wound, flesh-metal petals peeling back to form a corridor lit by pulses of blue light. It wasn't an invitation. It was a test. Inside, it felt like walking through the veins of a god. Walls pulsed with memory. Every step triggered flashes, visions, thoughts, screams not our own. One of the rookies dropped to his knees, sobbing. Another slit his own throat without a word. By the time we reached the central chamber, there were only 8 of us left. And he was waiting. Not in armor, not cloaked, just standing there, barefoot on a platform of woven steel and muscle, eyes closed like he was dreaming. Ghost One. He opened his eyes slowly, and I swear, for a moment, I saw the man he used to be. Broken, human, alone. Then it was gone. "You made it," he said. "I wondered if you would." My finger tightened on the trigger. He didn't move. "I watched you die," I said. He nodded. "I died, and I was rebuilt, not in labs, not by scientists, by the truth." I stepped closer. The chamber lit up. Patterns swirled around him, human shapes, Earth's history, wars, murders, revolutions. Fire, blood, silence. "You still think this is conquest," he said. "It's not. It's liberation." We opened fire. 7 rifles, armor-piercing rounds, high-velocity rail slugs. He didn't dodge. He didn't raise a shield. He just let it happen. The bullets hit him and stopped. Not like they bounced. They just froze in air, vibrating, screaming against invisible pressure. And then they dropped. He exhaled slowly. "This isn't resistance. This is mourning." He lifted one hand. I felt every scar on my body burn. The pain wasn't physical. It was memory. He was showing me everything I'd buried, every kill, every mistake, every order followed without thought. I screamed. But I didn't fall. "I didn't come here to beg," I snarled. "I came here to bury you." He smiled, sad, almost tired. "Then you're already dead." The rest of the team charged. And Ghost One moved, not like a man, like a storm. One motion, and the room warped. The walls became mirror surfaces. The ground split into infinity. The laws of physics folded into abstract shapes. 2 soldiers were atomized in less than a second. The rest? Taken. Not killed, just absorbed. Their bodies melted into the floor, their screams echoing like echoes in reverse, until it was just me and him. I reached for the nuke trigger on my suit. Deadman switch, 20 kiloton plasma core, enough to rip the tower apart at the quantum level. He saw it, and nodded. Do it. It won't change the outcome. But it will give them something to remember. I hesitated, not because I doubted the mission, but because part of me knew he wasn't the enemy anymore. We were, because Ghost One didn't become a god. He didn't conquer us. He simply became what we always were, without apology, without denial, without chains. He became humanity, unfiltered, and we weren't ready to see ourselves that clearly. I closed my eyes and triggered the core. I don't remember the explosion. I don't remember dying, but I remember waking up, not in a bed, not in a body, just awareness, floating, and a voice, his voice, inside everything. You wanted to die a man. You died a mirror. I don't know what I am now. Not flesh, not code, something in between. A shard of what Ghost One became. A witness, a reminder. The tower still stands, and from it the new world grows, not with guns, not with chains, but with certainty. We were the species that refused to be corrected, and in the end, we didn't evolve to join the galaxy. We evolved to replace it. I don't breathe anymore. Not in the way you'd understand it. There's no air in my lungs, no rise and fall of a chest. My blood doesn't pump. My heart doesn't beat. But I'm alive, or something worse, something more. I don't remember my name. Just fragments, the taste of ash, the weight of steel in my hands, the sound of boots crunching rubble, a general's voice saying, "Make them remember." They will, because I am memory now. I am what remains of a man who believed we could resist the future. The tower still stands. Its shadow stretches across half a continent, not because of its height, but because its influence warps space around it. The planet has changed completely. There are no nations anymore, no flags, no governments, just the ascended and the echoes of what we used to be. The last nuclear detonation, the one I triggered, didn't destroy the tower. It did something worse. It finished it. The pulse burned through its flesh and metal like a second heartbeat. A final signal to begin. The tower opened. Not like a door, like a hatch. And from its core, something rose. Ghost One. But not as a man, not even as a god, as an idea made flesh. A walking construct of memory, pain, willpower, and rage so distilled it no longer needed a body. He had form, yes, but only because we needed to see him. He was 10 stories tall, covered in armor grown from history itself. Symbols carved from our own blood. Every movement sounded like war drums in the bones of the earth. And he walked, 1 step, 2, then lifted his head to the sky and spoke. Not to us, to the galaxy. His voice was broadcast across deep space, through every relay system Earth had ever touched, hijacking every satellite, every probe, every listening station, human or alien. You came in peace. You offered unity. You looked at Earth and saw a species broken by its own design. You offered correction. Then his tone changed, steel in fire, cold, focused, absolute. We do not seek peace. We do not ask for understanding. We are not a child to be guided. We are the product of violence, of betrayal, of fire, of survival. And in your judgment, we found clarity. You gave us your mirror. We shattered it. Now hear this. Earth belongs to no one, not even to itself. We are the storm the stars forgot. We are what comes after the Empire. We are the species that chooses to burn. After the transmission, Earth went dark. On every frequency, every wavelength, total radio silence. The collective didn't respond, not because they were ignoring us, but because they finally understood. We weren't part of their galaxy anymore. We'd become something else. The Ascended began terraforming, not with machines, but with intention. Forests spread like viral thoughts. The oceans thickened with new life, strange, aware, cooperative without command. Cities were not rebuilt. They were grown, structures shaped like bones and temples, lit with bioluminescent threads that pulsed in harmony with the tower. No currency, no language, no law. Just instinctive hierarchy, bonded by the echo of Ghost One's signal, still vibrating in the minds of the Ascended. Some of the old humans still resisted, hiding in the mountains, in caves. Underground tunnels. I visited them, not to convert them, just to watch. They weren't fighting anymore. They were waiting to die. They'd seen what the world had become and knew they had no place in it. One man, a captain from an old unit, recognized me. His face twisted in fear. His hand reached for a pistol he didn't have the strength to lift. "I'm still human," he whispered. I knelt beside him. "You were," I said. "It's not malice, not vengeance. The Ascended don't kill for revenge. They prune. They remove what no longer grows. Across the solar system, Earth's influence spreads. Saturn's rings collapse into a spiral data array. Mars begins to thaw. Venus receives redirected ion storms for heat redistribution. Nothing was ordered. It just happened, as if Earth had awakened and started rearranging her children. Because Ghost One didn't just evolve himself. He turned Earth into a seed, a virus for the galaxy, and still no one comes. Not from the collective, not from the stars. Because they're watching, and they're afraid. We were the anomaly. Now we're the apex. A species that shouldn't have survived, that refused to be healed, that chose to keep its wounds and turn them into weapons. A species that burned the mirror instead of fixing the reflection. I walk through the new world daily, not as a soldier, not even as a man, but as a reminder. Some of us are kept in this form, echoes, ghosts, preserved fragments of what came before, to teach, not with words, but with presence. We are the last lie the new generation sees before they complete their metamorphosis, and we tell them the truth. We were once weak, we blamed our pain, we feared our past, but now, we are what we were always meant to become. Above Earth, the sky is red, not from fire, from power, a perpetual aurora, swirling with the signal of the tower, a warning, a beacon, an invitation. We don't broadcast messages anymore. But if the stars were to listen carefully, if some alien mind sitting on a cold moon 1,000 light-years away tuned into the remnants of our old frequencies, they might catch a whisper. A single phrase wrapped in static and ash. We are not the children of peace. We are the parents of power. And if they come, if they ever come again, they will not find Earth. They will find what Earth became, and they will not leave. This is how it ends, not with surrender, not with unity, but with fear, with fire, with the last word. Humanity? Corrected? No, perfected.